Hello everybody and welcome to part 32 of Kerbal Space Program. The journey continues. We start off as we left off last episode, well, on the planet of Eve and live. Yeah, we're doing live commentary to start off with because I kind of shortchanged you right at the end of last episode. We did the landing live, but I also like to do the first steps on the planet as well. So let's get our ladders down. We'll just start off like that, and then we'll go to the normal time acceleration post-commentary style stuff. Tommel Kerman, our mission commander, let's get you down. Actually, before we do that, we need to start getting reports, don't we? Crew reports. Yeah, that's good. Tommel Kerman, now you can head down, matey boy. There we go. On a new planet, and as I mentioned in the previous episode, it's got the highest gravity of any planet, so I'm not sure jumping does not do much. Fair enough, I suppose. We can run quite nicely though, so that's not too bad. Let's plant a flag. Where are we? We are on the Eve peaks. So much purple. Good stuff. Okay, not the flag. Let's get our science officer Gwenby Kerman down as well to do her thing. Down you come. Yeah, Eve I think it's nearly twice the gravity of Kerbin. So that's not going to be fun to walk around it or climb back up those ladders, come to think of it. Right, so we need you to go and grab a surface sample. The surface appears to have a very strong purple tint to it. Or is it grey and just looks purple because everything else on Eve is? You start to wonder if you're not taking on a purple tint yourself. Nope. Let's go back. Did we take an EVA report with you? Did not take an EVA report with you. Everything is tinted purple. You feel like you're changing colour. That's not good news. Goggles are supposed to be green. So, good stuff. We are down. I just wanted to do that bit because, as I said, I feel like I kind of shortchanged you a little bit at the end of the last episode. But we will switch back to the post-commentary. We'll get ourselves sorted here, and we've got plenty more places to visit and more science to collect across the surface of Eve. With lots on the to-do list then, we'd better get our backsides in gear. Tommel Kerman makes his way back over to the landing craft, climbs the ladder and hops back aboard before popping open the cargo bay doors, revealing our little suite of science experiments. We get one full set of readings, we transfer that across to one of our experiment storage containers, and now we need to take a second set. Taking two sets of all these readings, of course, because we'll want to process one in our orbital science lab and bring the other set back down to the surface of Kerbin. Some of those experiments will need resetting, of course, and this is where Gwenby Kerman leaps into action. I forget to take a second set of reports and a surface sample whilst I'm playing through this to start with, so I have to go and do that off camera. But before too long, both our Kerbals are back aboard. Our survey of Eve's peaks is complete, and we are ready to move on to our next location. So we fire up those nuclear turbojets and we head off on our way. Always a nervous time with this craft. It's not got a lot of ground clearance and it's very heavy at the back end, so I'm always very nervous about taking off and landing. Not quite so much landing, but still a nervous moment. But we get away fine, and now we can start to head eastwards, trying to track the orbital path of the Copernicus as close as we possibly can. If we follow this path for long enough, we'll end up on a coastline where I'm hoping to take our final set of readings, and fingers crossed we'll have encountered a couple more biomes on the way. I'm hoping to get 4 biomes worth of data in total, just as a balance between getting as much science as possible and making sure I don't go absolutely crazy from the monotony of it all. We don't have long to wait for our next biome though. Very quickly we find ourselves out of Eve's Peaks and into its foothills, so we begin our descent immediately. On the way down we're going to take another set of science readings because on a previous mission we've taken a set whilst we're in Eve's upper atmosphere, but now we're going to take one in Eve's lower atmosphere. It's just a quick and easy way to get another set of science. We'll have to repeat this process if we want 2 sets from the lower atmosphere. We have to take one whilst we're flying, get down, process that, reset experiments, and then we'll get the next set on the next hop. After a predictably uneventful descent, we deploy our landing gear and start searching for a suitable place to touch down, once again keeping those engines on a little bit, just to make sure we keep control of the craft. It takes us a minute or two to find somewhere reasonably flat, but then after a nervous approach we do find ourselves with all 3 sets of landing gear safe and sound on the ground, ready to begin a fresh set of experiments. First of all though, we need to sort out those experiments we performed whilst in the air, so we get those transferred across to the storage containers and Gwenby pops out to reset our experiments, and now we can get on with the business of taking a fresh load of data for our new biome. Gwenby is the first down onto the surface this time. She's quickly joined by Tommel, and they start gathering some data and of course planting a flag, and I'm starting to worry that being on Eve this long is getting to our Kerbals a little bit. Anyway, with our preliminary sets of surface activities out of the way, Gwenby will need to pop down a little later to get a second set of those readings. We can move on to our science bay, getting one set of readings, transferring them across, resetting the experiments, getting everything else moved about. It's a fiddly business with this craft. It wasn't designed primarily to be convenient for science. It was primarily designed to get down and then back off of the surface again, which isn't an easy task. So yeah, this is a bit of an involved job. Before too long though, our Kerbals have taken 2 complete sets of experiments, reports, readings and samples, have put them aboard our experiment storage containers, have stowed that safely in our little science bay there, and are once again ready to move on to pastures new. So we take off and continue our journey east, hoping to pick up at least one more biome before we end up on the coast for our final batch of science. We're going to pick up the pace here a little bit. We don't want to spend all day doing this. We get our second batch of atmospheric science. Some of these are biome specific, but I'm not going to worry too much about picking up all of these. We're going to end up with more than enough science for this mission. This was a long flight. We had to pick up quite a lot of altitude to make sure we got over those mountains, and it being a mountainous region, those are kind of the 2 biomes we've already visited. But eventually, after a little while, we do find ourselves over the highlands, so we cut our engines and begin our descent. The landing was interesting. We line ourselves up for what I thought was a nice long flat stretch of ground, but I procrastinate a little bit too much. I'm a little too cautious, and we find ourselves over some uneven ground, so I have to swing the craft around to find yet another flat patch. But it's second time lucky, and we do eventually find ourselves touching down in the Midlands. Not the Highlands, but still a biome we haven't been to before, so plenty of fresh science for us there. Once again, our first task is to sort out the atmospheric science we've gained, so we get that stored away. We pop Gwenby Kerman out to reset experiments and transfer the last little bits of science across to their appropriate containers before we can start investigating this new landing site. Tommel Kerman takes his turn to be the first down onto the surface, taking some reports and of course planting the flag, and yeah, I'm starting to get worried about our Kerbals by this point, but I'm sure they'll be fine. With those formalities out of the way, we can finally get round to taking our penultimate set of readings from all of our science experiments. Gwenby Kerman, once again, bless her, doing most of the legwork for this one. It doesn't take long for us to get that done and dusted, to get that data safely stashed aboard our craft, and with that we are nearly finished with our mission here down to the surface of Eve. We just have one more biome to pick up, so once again it is time for us to be on our way. We use the slope of the terrain around us to perform a quick 3-point turn to get us pointing in the right direction before we fire up those engines and take off for our final hop. We don't have any atmospheric science to do this time around, although I do take a crew report quickly just because it's nice and simple and, well, I may as well. But we climb to a nice height, what I think is a good height for us to scout for our planned landing spot. It's not too long before we spy the expected stretch of coastline. It's still a fair distance away, so we cruise on over there. We're aiming for the southernmost tip of that sea you can see there, or the rightmost tip as you're looking at it, because that's Well, near enough right under the orbital path of the Copernicus, so we're going to try and land there, or as near as possible to there, and then we can take off from there, get into orbit, and hopefully our relative orbits won't be too inclined to each other. Landing is again a little bit tricky where we're being so cautious with the landings, but we do eventually manage to get ourselves down right next to the shore and ready to begin this final stage of our landing mission. Gwenby Kerman gets out to pop that crew report onto the storage containers before making her way onto the surface to examine Eve's shallows. Tonal Kerman joins her shortly afterwards to plant the flag, and I think the prospect of returning to space shortly is relieving some of the pressure on our Kerbals, who offer the observation that though this is known as the Purple Planet, it could be more of a mauve. As this is their final excursion, our Kerbals are in no hurry to return to the craft. They even find themselves down by the sea's edge, having a little paddle. I'm not sure what this sea is made of, or how advisable it is to go in this in a spacesuit, but well, that's Kerbals for you. But eventually we do have to get down to the business end of things and wrap this one up. Once they're back with the craft, our crew begin methodically working through their tasks, making sure we have 2 sets of every experiment, every report, every surface sample taken and stowed away safely. And with that, our expedition down to the surface of Eve is finished. And now what that's left is the not insignificant task of trying to get ourselves back into orbit. So our objectives are completed, our crew is prepared, so we apply a little bit of power to the engines, get ourselves pointing in the right direction before we open those throttles up all the way and take off, starting to head towards our rendezvous with the Copernicus in orbit. We need to be reasonably aggressive with this initial part of the ascent. Those nuclear turbojets are very prone to overheating once we get above 30,000 metres or so, and it gets worse the longer we take to get up there. So we can't just do a long, slow climb and then kick in full power. No, we need to get up there sooner rather than later. The thrust from those nuclear turbojets is going to taper off as we climb higher and higher, although it's not until we get above 20,000 metres that really starts to tell, so we have to kick that up a notch or two. It's also in this little transition period between 20,000 and 30,000 metres that we start to acquire a healthy collection of overheat warnings. With our fingers crossed that those aren't going to come to anything, we continue our ascent. At about 35,000 metres, those turbojets are really starting to fall away, so we fire up our main rocket engines and continue to make our way ever higher. By about 45,000 metres, those jet engines have done their work, so it's time to say farewell to those. We do get a bit of an explosion, but no real harm done, and we also jettison those ventral tanks as we've now drained those completely. It's not too long before we've drained those dorsal tanks as well, so we decouple those and we continue to push our apoapsis up to our desired altitude of about 95 kilometres or so before we kill those main engines and just wait for us to reach the zenith of our trajectory. Now this part is where it could all go very badly wrong. Now normally I like to take a gently approach with circularising the orbit, but we don't have a choice here. We've got to pick up a lot of horizontal velocity in a very short space of time, so we've just got to go full throttle and hope for the best. It goes quite well. We do get a bit of a problem with engine gimballing. Also, for some reason, towards the end, I'm just going full throttle or no throttle when I didn't really need to. So we don't get a perfectly circular orbit, but we are at least in orbit, and it's not looking too bad. So, yeah, given how badly that could have gone, I'm going to count that as a win. We've got a little over 200 metres per second of delta V left on this craft, so we put that to good use. We circularise at apoapsis, we perform a plane change manoeuvre to line our orbit up with that of the Copernicus, and we recircularise as that manoeuvre has shifted our apoapsis a little bit, and with that, the crew of our landing craft can do no more. They just have to sit back and hand things over to the crew of our interplanetary vehicle. And so we're back with Corkin and Dottie Kerman, who've been sat in orbit, stuck there twiddling their thumbs for quite a while now. But now's the time for them to, well, sit there and twiddle their thumbs a little while longer. The landing vehicle is in a slightly higher orbit, and it's a little over half an orbit round. So we've got to wait for the Copernicus to catch up to Tonal and Gwenby. And yeah, thank God for time acceleration. It takes a little while, but eventually we do catch up sufficiently for us to start planning our rendezvous manoeuvre. Now this is just going to be 2 gentle burns of about 20 metres per second each. Our orbits aren't that far apart, so it's never going to take much. And before too long, our mothership is arriving in the vicinity of our landing craft. We switch back to our landing craft because, now stripped of more than 80% of its original weight, it is the more agile of the two, and we gently bring it into dock. It doesn't have that much monopropellant, so we can't throw it around the place, but eventually our 2 craft have once again merged into one. There's not much left for us to do in orbit now. We get TOML transferred across, we get the science transferred across from the experiment storage containers aboard our landing craft to the experiment storage containers aboard the Copernicus, and then Gwendoby Kerman takes whatever extraneous experiments we have left over across and stores them in the command module of our interplanetary cruiser. So we've got about a year to go until our optimum transfer window opens up, but we don't need to worry about that. It's about 2,000 metres per second of delta V to get back to Kerbin at that optimum point. Or we can force the issue now for about 4,000 metres per second of delta V. And, well, we've got the delta V to throw at the problem, so throw it at the problem we shall. First of all, though, we need to raise our orbit up to a slightly more ideal altitude from which to make our transfer burn. We're going for about 1,000 kilometres here. The gravity well of Eve is very steep. It takes us about 1,000 metres per second of delta V just to get up to that height, but eventually we do get there and we are ready to start planning our departure from Eve. Getting the manoeuvres set up is relatively quick and easy, especially because this is the second time I've had to do this. The game bugged out the first time around, and I made a note of the details of the manoeuvre. So that's over quite quickly. We get ourselves lined up, and then we light up our engines to begin the 2,200 metres per second burn to take us on a course towards Kerbin. Another benefit of having to attempt this twice is the fact that I now know that the burn time indicator is hideously wrong. It's going to be closer to 27 minutes rather than the 5 that the game seems to be suggesting. But eventually we do get through that. We have to make some minor adjustments, not very much at all, and we are now on our way. So our mission to Eve is a success, our Kerbals are on their way home, and that is where we are going to leave things for today. I do hope you've enjoyed it, everybody. If you have, please consider liking, subscribing, possibly even following me on Twitter, details in the description. I will be back soon with some more from our favourite little green astronauts, probably as this craft arrives back at Kerbin, because I think that happens before the Ptolemy gets to Dres, but we'll have to see. Anyway, until then, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.